Most people spend their lives chasing new goals, new strategies, and new information, yet they keep getting the same results, and they wonder why nothing truly changes. They think the problem is lack of motivation, lack of resources, or lack of time, but the truth is far simpler and far more confronting. The real reason most people don't change their lives is because they haven't changed what they demand from themselves. You see, goals are things you want, but standards are things you live by. Goals come and go. Standards are non-negotiable. And the moment you understand this, everything begins to shift. Your life today is not an accident, and it is not the result of luck, talent, or circumstances alone. It is the product of the standards you have accepted for yourself over time, whether consciously or unconsciously. Many people believe that if they set bigger goals, everything will change, but goals are wishes without standards to support them. You can want success, health, confidence, or happiness with all your heart, but if your standards remain low, your results will always fall back to where your standards are. Standards are the invisible rules you live by, the line you refuse to cross, the level you decide is normal for you. They determine how you act when no one is watching, how you respond under pressure, and what you settle for when things get uncomfortable. If someone says they want a great life but accepts excuses, procrastination, or self-doubt as normal, their life will reflect that acceptance every single day. Look at any area of life where people succeed consistently, and you will find high standards behind it. Athletes don't win because they have wishes. They win because mediocrity is unacceptable to them. Leaders don't rise because they hope for influence. They rise because they refuse to tolerate weakness in their preparation and integrity in their decisions. In contrast, people who feel stuck are often living by standards they never consciously chose. They tolerate relationships that drain them, habits that weaken them, and thoughts that limit them, then wonder why their lives feel small. The truth is, whatever you tolerate, you train yourself to accept as normal, and whatever becomes normal becomes permanent unless you interrupt it. Standards shape your identity. When you raise your standards, you change how you see yourself, and when your identity changes, your behavior follows automatically. You don't need more motivation to live up to who you believe you are. If you see yourself as someone who honors their word, you don't need to force discipline, you simply act in alignment. If you see yourself as someone who demands excellence, you don't negotiate with excuses. This is why lasting change happens in an instant. The moment you decide that something is no longer acceptable, that decision creates emotional leverage, and emotional leverage creates action. Most people wait for confidence before raising their standards, but confidence is a result, not a requirement. Standards come first. When you decide that quitting, settling, or shrinking is no longer an option, your brain begins to search for solutions instead of excuses. You start finding ways where before you saw walls. The quality of your life rises not because the world changes, but because you do. Every breakthrough in human history began with someone refusing to accept the existing standard and demanding more from themselves and their environment. Your life works the same way. The moment you raise what you expect from yourself, life responds, because life always matches the standards you live by. Who you become in life is not determined by your circumstances, your past, or even your talents. It is determined by the identity you adopt and the standards that identity demands. Standards are not just rules for behavior, they are expressions of who you believe you are. Every action you take is a vote for the identity you live by, and every time you lower your standards, you reinforce a version of yourself that accepts less than what is possible. When people struggle to change, it is rarely because they don't know what to do. It is because their standards are not aligned with the person they want to become. You cannot consistently act in ways that contradict your identity, which is why temporary motivation fades and old patterns return when identity remains unchanged. Identity is the internal story you tell yourself about who you are, what you deserve, and what is normal for you. If your identity says you are someone who struggles, someone who always falls short, or someone who plays small, your standards will unconsciously match that story. You may aim high for a moment, but eventually your behavior will pull you back to the level that feels familiar. On the other hand, when you decide to upgrade your identity, when you see yourself as disciplined, capable, and committed, your standards rise automatically. You stop asking if you feel like doing what needs to be done because it is simply what someone like you does. This is why real transformation is not about changing habits first. It is about changing the meaning behind those habits. A person who sees themselves as healthy does not need constant reminders to exercise or eat well. Their standards make unhealthy choices feel uncomfortable. A person who sees themselves as a leader does not wait to be told to take responsibility. They step up because leadership is part of who they are. Standards create a psychological boundary, a clear line between what fits your identity and what no longer belongs in your life. Raising your standards can feel uncomfortable at first because it requires letting go of an old identity that once kept you safe. Comfort often disguises itself as loyalty to who you have been, but growth demands that you release that version of yourself. When you raise your standards, you send a message to your nervous system that the old way is no longer an option. Your mind then begins to reorganize around this new identity, searching for behaviors, beliefs, and actions that support it. This is not force, it is alignment. Every lasting change you admire in others is the result of an identity shift supported by higher standards. The outer world always reflects the inner one. When you decide who you are and back that decision with non-negotiable standards, your destiny begins to unfold in a new direction. Not because life becomes easier, but because you become stronger, clearer, and more intentional in how you show up each day. Lasting change does not begin with inspiration, information, or even intention. It begins the moment you decide that something is no longer acceptable in your life. Most people stay stuck not because they lack desire, but because they tolerate conditions that quietly drain their energy and potential. Tolerance is subtle. It whispers that things are not that bad, that you can live with this a little longer, that someday you will deal with it. But every day you tolerate a problem, you reinforce it. What you allow to remain becomes part of your norm. And what becomes normal eventually feels permanent. Human beings are incredibly adaptable, sometimes to their own detriment. We adapt to stress, dissatisfaction, unhealthy habits, and unfulfilling relationships, and we call it resilience. In reality, it is often resignation. The turning point comes when adaptation turns into frustration, when the emotional cost of staying the same becomes heavier than the fear of change. That moment is powerful because it creates leverage. Leverage is the force that moves people to act, and without it, change remains an idea instead of a reality. When you raise what you will no longer tolerate, you create a clear boundary between your old life and your new one. Boundaries are not punishments, they are declarations of self-respect. They tell your mind and your environment that the old patterns have expired. This might mean refusing to accept excuses from yourself, refusing to stay in situations that diminish you, or refusing to repeat behaviors that sabotage your progress. At first, this feels uncomfortable because the mind prefers familiarity over improvement. But discomfort is not a sign of failure. It is a sign that growth is taking place. Many people wait for clarity before taking action, but clarity often comes after commitment, not before. The decision to no longer tolerate something forces your brain to find solutions. Instead of asking why this is happening to you, you begin asking how to change it. This shift in questions changes everything. Your focus moves from survival to creation, from endurance to empowerment. The energy that was once spent coping is now redirected toward building something better. Raising your standards is an act of courage because it requires honesty. It requires you to look at the areas of your life where you have been settling and take responsibility for changing them. Responsibility is not blame, it is power. The moment you own your tolerance, you reclaim your ability to choose. And choice is the foundation of freedom. Every meaningful transformation in life can be traced back to a moment when someone said enough is enough. That moment may not be loud or dramatic, but it is decisive. It is the point where you stop negotiating with the part of you that wants comfort and start honoring the part of you that wants growth. From that moment on, your actions begin to align with a higher standard. And step by step, your life begins to reflect the boundaries you have chosen to live by. Most people believe that if they just learn enough, read enough, or understand enough, their lives will eventually change. But information alone has never transformed a human being. People know what to eat, how to exercise, how to manage money, and how to improve relationships, yet knowledge without action changes nothing. The real driver of transformation is emotional leverage, the deep internal reason that makes change no longer optional. Until the emotional pain of staying the same outweighs the discomfort of change, People will continue repeating familiar patterns, no matter how clearly they understand what needs to be done. Emotion is what gives information power. When something hits you emotionally, it moves from your head into your nervous system. It becomes real. This is why people can tolerate years of dissatisfaction and then change their lives in an instant. The change did not come from new information, it came from a shift in emotional intensity. Something happened that made continuing the old way feel unbearable. At that moment, excuses lose their grip, fear loses its control, and action becomes inevitable. Without emotional leverage, even the best strategies remain unused. Human behavior is driven by the desire to avoid pain and gain pleasure. When the pain of NGE feels greater than the pain of staying the same, people stay stuck. They rationalize, justify, delay. But when the pain of staying the same becomes intense enough, the brain immediately begins searching for solutions. This is not a conscious process, it is biological. Emotional leverage rewires focus. Suddenly, obstacles become challenges and challenges become fuel. What once felt impossible now feels necessary. This is why willpower is unreliable. Willpower depends on mood, energy, and circumstances. Emotional leverage creates commitment. Commitment does not ask how you feel, it demands action. When change becomes a must, you stop waiting for the right time, you stop negotiating with comfort. You do what needs to be done because not doing it is no longer an option. This is the difference between people who talk about change and people who embody it. Emotional leverage can come from pain, but it can also come from purpose. It can come from realizing the cost of not living up to your potential, from seeing the impact your choices have on the people you love, or from recognizing the life you are capable of creating if you stop settling. When emotion is tied to a compelling vision of the future, it becomes a powerful force for growth. It pulls you forward instead of pushing you away from fear. Lasting transformation always follows an emotional decision, not an intellectual one. The moment you feel change in your bones, when you associate staying the same with loss and growth with meaning, your behavior shifts naturally. From that point on, action becomes consistent, not because it is easy, but because it is emotionally aligned with who you choose to become. The moment you decide to demand more from yourself, everything begins to change. Not because the world suddenly becomes kinder or easier, but because you shift the way you show up in it. Most people wait for a permission to step into a higher version of themselves. They wait for confidence, validation, or perfect conditions, but life does not reward waiting. It responds to decision. When you raise your internal demands, your posture changes, your focus sharpens, and your energy rises. You begin to move with intention instead of hesitation, and that shift alone alters the trajectory of your life. Demanding more from yourself is not about harshness or self-criticism. It is about self-respect. It is the recognition that your potential deserves discipline, that your time deserves purpose, and that your future deserves effort. When you stop settling for half commitment and inconsistent effort, you send a powerful message to your mind. You tell it that excuses are no longer acceptable and that growth is the priority. The mind responds by expanding its perception of what is possible. What once felt overwhelming now feels challenging but achievable. Higher self-demands create clarity. Instead of constantly debating whether to act, you decide once and for all who you are and how you operate. Decision eliminates fatigue. When your standards are clear, your choices become simple. You no longer waste energy on internal conflict because the rules are already set. This clarity frees up mental and emotional resources that can be directed toward creativity, problem solving, and execution. As a result, progress accelerates. When you demand more from yourself, your environment begins to respond. People treat you differently because you carry yourself differently. Opportunities appear not by chance, but because you are now prepared to recognize and seize them. You begin attracting situations that match your standards, not because of luck, but because your actions signal readiness. Consistency replaces intensity, and consistency is what builds momentum over time. There is a profound difference between wanting more and demanding more. Wanting is passive. Demanding is active. Wanting hopes for change. Demanding creates it. This demand is what separates those who live reactively from those who live deliberately. It is the line between surviving and truly living. When you demand more from yourself, you refuse to shrink in the face of challenge. You rise to meet it. knowing that growth is forged in discomfort. Every meaningful upgrade in life begins with a personal declaration. A declaration that says you are done playing small, done postponing your growth, and done betraying your own potential. When you make that declaration and back it with action, your life begins to expand in ways you could not have predicted. The quality of your life rises in direct proportion to the level of standards you enforce, and once you experience that elevation, there is no going back to the person you were before.